They told you Dracula was only a story, a creature of fiction, a nightmare born from one man's imagination in 1897. But the truth is far less comforting, because the monster Bram Stoker created did not emerge from fantasy. He emerged from history, from disease, from fear, from politics, and from a real man whose cruelty was so precise, so theatrical, that Europe remembered him for centuries. And the most disturbing part is not that Stoker borrowed from reality. It is how carefully he hid it. Bram Stoker never visited Transylvania, never met a Romanian, never witnessed the Carpathian Mountains. Yet he wrote with eerie conviction about an ancient predator rooted in Eastern Europe. His notes, preserved today, show a man obsessively researching folklore, geography, and a single historical figure whose name he underlined again and again. Vlad III, Vlad the Impaler, a 15th century Wallachian prince who impaled tens of thousands of people on wooden stakes, leaving forests of dying bodies as psychological weapons for his enemies. Ottoman soldiers wrote of approaching his lands and finding miles of corpses, twisting in the wind. The smell reached them before the sight did. Why would a Victorian librarian care about a medieval warlord known for cruelty, so extreme that even his own people feared him? Because Stoker wasn't searching for a monster. He was searching for a mechanism, and Vlad provided it. Vlad did not kill randomly. He killed symbolically, publicly, strategically. He used terror as governance. Impalement was slow, deliberate, theatrical. Victims could take days to die. He dined among them. Chroniclers describe him eating while watching the impaled writhe. This was not madness. It was psychological warfare. And Stoker recognized something familiar in that. Victorian Britain in the late 1800s was quietly terrified, not of war, not of famine, but of infiltration, of foreign blood, of disease that could pass invisibly from body to body, of moral corruption disguised as charm. Syphilis was rampant. Immigration from Eastern Europe was rising. London was filling with outsiders. Newspapers spoke of degeneration, of tainted bloodlines, of invisible threats entering respectable homes. Dracula is not just a vampire. He is a foreign invader. He buys property in London. He studies English customs. He moves among society undetected. He feeds not with violence but with intimacy. Through the body, through the blood. And blood in 1897 was not just metaphor. Blood was fear. Blood carried disease. Blood carried heredity. Blood carried shame. The novel's obsession with blood transfusions, written before transfusions were medically understood, is telling. 4 men give blood to Lucy as she weakens, unaware they are participating in something morally charged, something almost ritualistic. A Victorian reader would have recognized the subtext immediately. Sex, contamination, corruption. Dracula's bite is not an attack. It is an infection. And Stoker wrote this at a time when medical science was discovering that invisible organisms could travel through the body and destroy it slowly. Germ theory was new, terrifying. The idea that something unseen could infiltrate and hollow you out from within was no longer folklore. It was science. So Stoker fused medieval terror with modern fear. But he needed a face for it. Vlad's name gave him one. The word Dracul meant dragon, but also devil. Dracula meant son of the devil. Stoker copied the name from a history book and attached it to his creature. Yet he stripped away Vlad's politics, his wars, his motives, and left only one thing behind: the appetite for suffering. But even that was misunderstood, because Vlad did not drink blood. He spilled it, and Stoker turned that outward violence into inward consumption. A shift from spectacle to intimacy, from public horror to private violation. That shift is where the true genius and discomfort of the novel lies. Dracula does not conquer through armies. He conquers through seduction. He enters bedrooms, not battlefields. He erodes moral boundaries, not city walls. And this mirrors another Victorian anxiety rarely discussed openly: female sexuality. Lucy Westenra becomes corrupted after Dracula visits her. She becomes sensual, aggressive, predatory toward children. The men who loved her must destroy her body with a stake through the heart. Not to kill her, but to restore moral order. The act is described with disturbing intimacy: penetration, release, relief. It reads less like exorcism and more like ritual punishment for transgression. And Mina, the virtuous woman, survives because she resists desire, because she remains pure. Dracula's threat is not death. It is liberation from restraint, which is why he must be destroyed. Yet Stoker never openly states this. He hides it behind Gothic scenery and foreign superstition. He allows readers to feel the dread without naming its source. But the contradictions pile up. Dracula is ancient yet modern, barbaric yet aristocratic, foreign yet fluent in English law, a nobleman who understands property deeds and train schedules, a medieval relic perfectly adapted to industrial Britain. Because Stoker was not writing about the past. He was writing about the present disguised as folklore. And the more you examine it, the clearer it becomes that Dracula is a composite fear of Eastern Europe, of disease, of sexuality, of immigration, of moral decay, of science revealing invisible horrors. Vlad the Impaler provided the historical cruelty. Folklore provided the supernatural framework. Victorian anxiety provided the true heartbeat. But there is one more layer rarely acknowledged. Stoker worked for years as the manager of the Lyceum Theatre in London, under the famous actor Henry Irving, a charismatic, dominating man whom Stoker admired deeply, perhaps obsessively. Some biographers believe Dracula's aristocratic presence and hypnotic authority were modeled partly on Irving, a man Stoker simultaneously revered and feared, a man who could command rooms with a glance, a man whose personality overshadowed him for decades. Dracula, then, is also personal, a projection of power, charisma, and emotional control Stoker witnessed firsthand. Which means the vampire is not just historical, not just cultural, but psychological. A figure built from real cruelty, real anxiety, and real emotional tension. And this is why the story endured. Because readers were not frightened by fangs. They were frightened by recognition. They recognized the fear of being invaded by something charming, the fear of moral lines dissolving quietly, the fear that evil does not announce itself with violence, but with politeness and patience. Dracula never rushes. He studies, waits, adapts, just as Vlad waited to terrify armies without fighting them, just as disease spreads without being seen, just as social change creeps into rigid systems unnoticed. And here lies the unsettling truth. The real horror of Dracula is not immortality, not blood, not coffins. It is infiltration, the kind that happens slowly enough that people doubt it is happening at all, which is exactly how Stoker wanted it. Because by the time readers realize what Dracula represents, he is already inside London, inside homes, inside bodies, and the only way to stop him is through violence that mirrors his own. A stake, a beheading, a purification through brutality. Just as Vlad ruled through brutality, just as societies often respond to fear with cruelty of their own, Dracula is destroyed not because he kills, but because he reveals what the living are capable of doing when afraid. And that may be the most uncomfortable inheritance from Vlad the Impaler of all. The idea that monsters are not defined by what they consume, but by what they justify. So the next time you hear that Dracula is only fiction, remember the prince who dined among the impaled. Remember the Victorians terrified of invisible contamination. Remember the quiet panic over foreign bloodlines and female autonomy. Remember that Stoker did not invent a monster. He assembled one from reality, and then gave it a cape, so we would mistake history for fantasy. Because it is easier to fear a vampire than to confront the fears that created him, and far easier to stake a monster in a story than to examine the impulses that made him believable in the first place. Dracula survives not because he is supernatural,